All right, welcome everyone. Thank you guys for joining us this afternoon. So we're going to do something a little bit different with our panel session because we have these incredibly brilliant, esteemed professionals with me on the stage, but we also know that we have incredibly brilliant minds joining us, not only in the audience, but also online. So today's topic is basically what happens next. We've been talking a lot about the incredible work that's been going on in the Green Cluster, all of the deliverables, innovation, research, just inspiration for moving forward. But what does that next step mean? What does moving forward look like? We talked a lot about how we turn policy into action, but also how do we get inspired by action and turn that into policy? What we'd like to unpack here is how we can actively make the cultural sector more sustainable while upholding existing policy and influencing future policy. So today I would like to invite not only my beautiful colleagues up on the stage, but also every one of you to join us in this conversation. So we will have microphones that are passed around. I, of course, will start off by introducing our panelists, and we're going to start the conversation here. But feel free to jump in at any point in time. That includes all of you joining us from home. I do have my phone here, so if you have any questions, please go ahead and pop them in the Zoom chat, and we will make sure to get those questions up on stage. So I would like to start off, and I let my panelists introduce themselves, but to be completely honest, they all have such incredible CVs and unbelievable experience that I think it would take an hour to go through each one of them. So I apologize for not doing justice to everyone and just reading out your short bio. But it is my great pleasure to welcome to the stage today, we have Andrea Atzori from the European Commission DG for Education and Culture. Dr. Andrea Atzori is a team leader for cultural heritage at the European Commission in Brussels. An expert with over 20 years of experience in international heritage management and cultural cooperation, she has worked with key actors such as UNESCO, World Monuments Fund, the private sector, and the academia across Europe, the Middle East, and South Asia. She holds a PhD in archaeological sciences from the University of Padua, a Master's of Business Administration from the University of Maastricht, and a Master in Intercultural Studies. Thank you for joining us, Angela. We also are joined by Alexandre Caussé from the Fondation des Sciences du Patrimoine. Alexandre graduated in 2012 from the Institut des Études Politiques de Paris in International Affairs. Since 2013, he has been working for the French Ministry of Culture and the Fondation des Sciences du Patrimoine to implement and coordinate European research policies on cultural heritage. We're going to talk a lot about that. He has also been directing, since 2018, the Secretariat of the JPI Cultural Heritage and Global Change, coordinated by France, and coordinated between 2022 and 2025, the Horizon Europe Arch Project. And I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing that. That is the Alliance for Research on Cultural Heritage in Europe, which brought together 18 European countries, ministries, agencies, research institutions, and international organizations in order to harmonize policies and means allocated to research, laying the ground for a 10-year European partnership on resilient cultural heritage. Thank you for joining us, Alexandre. Additionally, we are joined by Eleonore Kissel, who is the Vice President of the European Confederation of Conservator-Restorers Organizations, or ECCO, or ECCO. Eleonore trained in paper conservation and in preventive conservation at the Sorbonne University, then worked as a freelancer. In 2014, she joined the Musée des Quai Branly Jacques Chirac as head of preservation, coordinating projects on 370,000 non-Western objects and vast photographic library and archival holdings. Thank you so much for joining us, Eleonore. Dr. Hermann Parzinger needs no introduction, as we've already gotten to be introduced to his incredible array. And please permit me to call you Hermann. Thank you. We also are joined by Cecil Krarup Andersen from the Royal Danish Academy. Cecil is an associate professor in the Paintings Conservation Program at the Royal Danish Academy, Architecture, Design, and Conservation in Copenhagen, Denmark. She earned her PhD in 2013 from the same institution, specializing in the structure and mechanics of paintings. Her research focuses on artistic techniques, mechanical behavior, and the impact of structural conservation treatments on long-term stability. She's contributed to projects involving the monitoring of collections and simulation of degradation scenarios, combining hands-on experience with scientific inquiry. Cecil's work bridges conservation practice and research, advancing our understanding of how and why paintings degrade. Thank you for joining us, Cecil. All right. We are also joined by Andrea Porcari from the Italian Association for Industrial Research. Is that AIRI or AIRI? AIRI. AIRI. There we go. We got this. Andrea has a master's, a degree in physics, and is a senior project manager at AIRI, which is the Italian Association for Industrial Research, with a long experience of working in projects and initiatives supporting industrial research and innovation. He regularly cooperates with research industry, policymakers, and civil society organizations to facilitate public-private cooperation and to design strategies on key enabling technology developments. Experiences on technology assessment and technology transfer, innovation management, science policy, and risk analysis. Thank you for joining us, Andrea. And finally, last but very much not least, we have Vania Virgili, who's the Director General of the European Research Infrastructure for Heritage Sciences, or E-RIHS. We're doing E-RIHS. There we go. Vania is the director of the European Research Infrastructure for Heritage Science based in Florence since May of 2025. She previously coordinated the implementation phase of E-RIHS at the Institute of Heritage Science of the Italian National Research Council, leading to its establishment as a European Research Infrastructure Consortium. She holds an MSc in Sciences for Cultural Heritage and a PhD in Chemical Sciences from Sapienza University of Rome, with specialization in material characterization of cultural heritage, and completed research training at the Centre de Recherche et de Restauration des Musées de France. I'm switching accents here. I'm not very good at it. In Paris. Thank you so much for joining us, Vania. All right. As mentioned, our colleagues that are joining us in this panel session have an incredible array of experience in the cultural sector. And so this is what we're really excited to explore today, because what we would like to do with this panel session is not only hear about their experiences and perspectives, but actually brainstorm together. So I pose this question to all of us. What is the next step? What does the future look like? How are we going to realize the ambitions and the goals of these projects beyond the projects? What do we want to do to turn policy into action, and how do we continue to bridge that gap between science and practice? So I would like to actually start off by asking Alexandre to join us in a conversation. Of course, as we talked about, you have an incredible experience in trying to actually do this. How do we actually implement policy into day-to-day practice, and what does that look like? And maybe you can tell us a little bit more about your projects.
Thank you very much. Is it working? Yeah. Yeah. So thank you very much for the invitation. And these types of events are very wonderful for us to see a bit the results of the project, and also these clusters to realize also how these projects are impactful in terms of innovation. So my role, more than translate policy into practice, is more to go from practice and translate this in policy and programs. So I would take the question from the other side, because I've been working for more than 10 years now to convince member states, countries, to invest in research on cultural heritage. I would say that in the last years with Horizon Europe, we've reached a kind of momentum with initiatives, funding or fields. I quote, among others, the European Research Infrastructure or Heritage Science, which has started very recently as an ERIC. The partnership, I will talk about it after. The cloud, also the cloud initiative, which is a very important thing. The hub, the heritage hub, the KIC on cultural and creative industries. These are an incredible number of initiatives for our field. The challenge will now to keep the commitments of the countries and the European Commission to support all these initiatives. And for this, we must in the next year, in the next decades, work on coordinating better all these mechanisms. Otherwise, we might lose the momentum and it will be harder to convince the member states to invest in these different initiatives. So for this, the partnership is one of the answers. So to illustrate a bit this momentum, in the last 10 years, I've been working also on the GPI cultural heritage, and countries have invested approximately 50 millions on different research calls. Now we talk for the next 10 years about 200 millions for a total of 7 different joint calls for research. So now the challenge will be to make the best of this project. So we have actually 30 countries which are willing to invest and to support research in this field, and the European Commission, Europe as a whole, will co-fund this initiative with a total of 60 million. And so to do this, we tried also to better reflect the continuum between research, the needs also of the professionals, and programming, because this, as we discussed a lot this morning and this afternoon as well, we have many projects which are funded and then the results are lost, or they stay on a platform, and there is no continuity between all these activities. So we have a chance now with this partnership to have a kind of framework, medium to long-term framework for 10 years, where we will be able to start from research needs in our field and to feed with the results of the different projects progressively policies and new research and funding opportunities in the field. And I hope this will answer a bit this question of the continuity and continuum between research, policy, and practice.
Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing that. And I think that that's one of the interesting things that I'd like to continue to explore, is this idea of once the project stops, it actually shouldn't stop. And, you know, how do we continue to get the work out into the community? How do we continue to get it out to people who haven't necessarily been a part of the project or who aren't familiar with European frameworks for projects? So I would like, if it's okay, to pass over to Angela to hear a little bit about your perspective on these frameworks.
Thank you very much, Kathleen. Good afternoon, everyone. It's a pleasure being here, indeed. And as I was saying to some colleagues, super interesting to be here, all the more because, indeed, we work on policies. As Kathleen said, I'm the team leader for cultural heritage in the policy unit at the DG for Education, Youth, Culture, and Sport. So we work with policies, but policies don't go without actions, and actions don't go without policies. So it's a continuous, permanent loop that we need to establish and to maintain to keep up with the needs of the moment. Now, what next? And how to fill in the gap? I think the first thing that is important to keep in mind, and I saw that somehow hinted also in some of the recommendations and the presentations just lately. The first thing that we need to keep in mind is that the Union is there to work on cultural heritage, to engage and ensure the preservation of European cultural heritage, of course, with a function that supplements the work of that is done by the member states. The real core action is led by the member states. We supplement, we add whenever there's need for further coordination, further work, further innovation. But that is important to the European Union project. Cultural heritage, culture, but especially heritage, is important to the European project. So as a tool for European cohesion, identity, a shared memory and past, and for cohesion, for creating the citizenship beyond the practical project. So that is there, and this is just to reassure, because we need to keep in mind that from the EU, heritage is at the core of our work. And this has been proved throughout years by the various cultural policies that have been adopted. And when it comes to the sustainable dimension of cultural heritage-related policies, we see them appearing really already quite a while ago. Most of, I see the average age in the room, most of us will remember about the European Year of Cultural Heritage, when sustainability and green were at the core of interventions and were reflected in one of the pillars of the European Framework for Action for Cultural Heritage. We may recall the still ongoing EU Culture Work Plan that covers 2023-2026, where cultural heritage, sustainability, and green are embedded as, again, one of the pillars, culture for the planet, hence brought forward on top of the priorities. And following that, of course, we have the OMC group that was launched on greening the culture sector that recently published a report in 2025. Most of you most likely have heard about it, Creative Shifts, but it's a useful, very useful reference for all of us, and the GoGreen project was featured in there. Important to highlight that this report also stressed the importance of continued research. But then, so this as a historical process, and then very recently, policy-wise, we have the Culture Compass that was adopted in November 2025, and where among the, so to contextualize, the Culture Compass is the document that now, as Professor Parzinger earlier explained, is the document that right now guides our policy priorities and actions from now in the future, looking forward to the future, and where cultural heritage is featured in 3 out of the 4 directions that are provided. 4 directions: cultural heritage for values and rights and accessibility of cultural heritage, particularly for youth; cultural heritage for competitiveness, cohesion and resilience; cultural heritage for international cultural relations. Now, I stress the importance of this policy document because it is through these lenses that we need to think of what comes next in terms of operations and actions, and what needs to be thought of for the future. Because whatever will be in the future, and the ongoing and forthcoming action need to align and to justify themselves with the priorities that are set forth in the compass. I heard quite some of the presentations were wondering on the sense and value of cultural heritage. The sense and value is there, and the priority angles for the EU and for the Commission are set over there. Thanks.
Thank you so much. And I really appreciate that. And I think that it's been made very clear that we're actually in a very fortunate situation to be in a place that does value cultural heritage so much, and that we do see it as such an essential element of our lives and stress, and there's funding available to support our work. And I think that it's really exciting to see that the priority is still there, and that there's a more ingrained connection between sustainability and cultural heritage, and that intrinsic duality is really reflected in policy as well. So I'd like to shift gears for a second here and talk a little bit about what this means kind of on not the policy level at the EU sector, but a little bit looking at the member states as well as civil society. So once again, I'm going to be asking a bunch of questions, but you guys please feel free to jump in. So if you have any questions at any point in time, raise your hand and we'll bring you a mic. But I'd love to pick up on one of the threads that you were talking about with this idea of sustainability. Sorry, my microphone is not very easy to navigate here while I look at you guys. But I think it's really interesting that, we're talking about the core action being at the member states, and we're talking about how policy influences the member states and how it influences organizations, whether they're international or national, and consequently what Gwen was talking about, this kind of trickle-down aspect. So I'd love to turn over to Hermann and hear a little bit about your perspective from Europa Nostra's standpoint, but also, of course, you can put your Hermann hat on and tell us a little bit about your thoughts on how policy influences practice and actually what it looks like in terms of that bridge between the EU level and the practitioner level.
Well, we must say that the level of the policy of the different member states is quite fragmented, and it's even more complicated. Looking at Germany, for example, it was a little bit more than 25 years ago, we did not even have a Minister of Culture for Germany. We had 16 ministers of culture, because after the Second World War, culture was an affair of the 16 German states. Of course, after the war, there have not been 16, but after unification, so Bavaria, Saxonia, Berlin, Hamburg, they are independent states. They all have a culture minister. And 27 years ago, they decided to create a ministry and for culture, but it's not a full federal minister, because one has to respect the role of the Länder. So he is called minister, but the state minister is the role, or by the protocol, it's a secretary of state, one can say. But nevertheless, it's a little bit like EU and the member states. Within Germany, it's very comparable. There's someone who is trying to give guidelines, programs to finance, but he has to, in a way, to agree with all the 16 states, and the same is in Europe happening as well. So this level, but when you talk about the European level, you have to take into account, and I can imagine there are other European states where it's equally complicated inside. So these three levels you have to take into account. And the problem is that, and I only can underline what Angela said, this is really, I find it great, the Culture Compass is for the first time there's a decent cultural policy, but cultural, not cultural heritage policy. There are several fields. The culture includes two sides of one coin. There's the creative sector, the artists and so on, and the other one is heritage. So heritage is mentioned definitely in this Culture Compass, and therefore this is a very important paper. And we have to see now, of course, how the different flagship programs, how all this is feasible, and this depends, of course, on the multi-annual financial framework. We had a discussion some weeks ago with the commissioner, with members of the parliaments, and they all understood that heritage, culture and heritage, of course, is part of culture, but also of other committees. It's very important for the region, very important for industry, think on tourism, very important for social cohesion. And in a way, of course, our dream was a little bit and there was some understanding, or some kind of understanding from the members of parliament, that there should be an overall budget, or the financement of this compass should be reflected. The fact that it's important for several committees should be reflected also where this budget is allocated, in a way. What will come out is a different issue. But and I think this is not fully your question, but I think it's important. We, on the European level, we have many associations, clusters, whatever, and Europa Nostra is one of them. But we are a little bit too fragmented. So about the cluster, I did not know before Katrin contacted me. E-RIHS, I knew, of course. What is the relation between you? So there are groups of people, and it's understandable that you are among you, because you are specialists. You are chemists, you are conservation scientists, and this is all right. But exchange between these groups to coordinate, because what we as Europa Nostra are fighting for, this is your same fight.
Yeah.
It's the funding of heritage in the role of this new policy. And I think there it needs more coordination in a way. I mean, sometimes it's good to run, each run on its own way. There's a saying in German, you run separated and you beat together. But at least one should know from each other in a better way. Maybe it's just my ignorance, I don't know. Maybe there's much more knowledge among the different groups. But I understood today you are so close to what we are doing.
Yeah.
But you are bringing the perspective of a certain science in it. And we, Europa Nostra, the history of Europa Nostra is more the castle and old houses owner and so on, and from 60 years ago, and now it's more and more becoming more professional. We have heritage professionals all over Europe. So there's a huge potential, and bringing all this together, I think, would make us all stronger. Not in a way that everything has to be in one pot, this not, but exchange. The exchange is something we have, for example, and Angela was also there, the European Heritage Alliance. So we together with the European Heritage Alliance, Europeana is there and many others, have the European Heritage Hub. We have a leading role, but together with this whole consortium, this is important. We do not want to play only our role. Yeah. We only can achieve something if we do it together with all the others. And why not, I don't know, E-RIHS or the Green Cluster, a role in this Heritage Alliance, because we informed about, this was the day after the meeting which we had with the Commission, the Member of Parliament, we informed them what was the outcome and so on, and what would be next. There's always the question, what will be next? So I think one should really think about that.
I love that, and I'm so grateful that you brought this up, and I'm sure all of you experience this in your work as well. For me, there's this constant frustration that, I have spent the last 10 years of my life just focusing on this intersection of sustainability and culture, and I still, every single day, learn about new projects and new people who are doing very similar work to what I am, and it's like, how do we get all working together, because we're all working towards the same goal, and wouldn't it be really beneficial to be working together? Let's collaborate on things, let's share knowledge, let's, try to figure out ways that we can support each other rather than learning from the same things. Yeah, go ahead, Bessie. Let's see, can we get a microphone down here, guys? Sorry, ladies. Can we get a microphone?
I have it.
Thank you.
Hello?
We're just going to be ready for microphones. Thanks.
Yeah, just following on your comment, I wanted to say that there already are established networks in Europe, like the European Network of Conservation, Restoration, Education. And just last week, we had a PhD conference for conservation restoration. We have 44 members, and so every 2 years, we highlight research that's being carried out in conservation restoration. So there are things that are being done on a European level, and we can join these networks, whether it's Encore or ECCO, depending on your background. And so this is one way we can work together in developing research in conservation practice. Thank you.
No, absolutely. But this is exactly what I'm talking about. There's so many amazing initiatives, and how do we coalesce? How do we bring things to make sure that everyone has access and knowledge of all of these incredible initiatives? So I don't know. I mean, whose job is that? I guess this is my question. Is this something that's more grassroots? Is this something that's from the European Union and level down? Is this something that we need to, how do we actually coordinate this? But maybe, I don't know, Eleonore, maybe you can jump in a little bit and tell us about kind of how ECCO is managing this. What is your perspective on the coalition and coordination across countries?
Well, ECCO is a European confederation of professional associations of conservators. We represent roughly 7,000 practitioners. So it's important because professional associations can bridge the gaps between research that's being done, the way it is applied and validated by practitioners. It also works very closely with networks such as Encore for initial training, but also long life learning. And it goes from everything from PhD to micro-crediting on continuing education modules. It's a difficult role because conservation, while it is at the center of the discussions we're having today, is a small profession. 7,000 members to me is enormous. But just for the fun of it, I looked up HVAC businesses, of which there are 14,000 in Belgium alone and 500,000 in Europe. And that gives you a scale of where we sit in this ecosystem. And so to me, part of the work that a confederation of professional associations such as ECCO and the members, its members, that is national associations, professional associations of conservators, the role that we can have is that we do very solid groundwork at the European level, such as defining the competencies of what is a conservator, such as working with the NACE, which is the European Classification of Economic Activities, so that there is a very discrete economic code for our activities. And we can be part of European projects such as Charter, which is the blueprint that tried to position all the professions within the cultural ecosystem, that is cultural heritage, but also CCIs. And if everybody through these projects gets a role, gets a space, and each profession defines itself and by itself and in relationship with all other professions of this ecosystem, then it gels. And then it is a way of answering this mosaic of, or this fragmentation of projects which you see. It's for me a way to, if everybody is well positioned, then it's easier to work together in a way. I don't know if that answers very well the question you had asked.
No, I think it starts to, but I still feel like we've got this kind of this kind of question about the responsibility, the role, like where do we see, because as you mentioned, like we are a small community. I mean, it's amazing how many people in this room I already know. I was like so excited to see my old friends, someone from I haven't seen in 13 years, which was really fun. But we are a small community. And so why is there this silo, like this massive fragmentation? Why so many silos? So I think that and you know, I think that this is what's interesting is that networks like Encore, networks like ECCO are really doing these incredible things with bringing people together. And then you guys are working together, but then there are all of these other organizations who are doing similar work, and how do we, you know, coordinate amongst that? So I guess it's still a question. I don't know. I would love to open up to anyone who would be interested in kind of throwing their 2 cents in, and that also, of course, includes the audience. But the thought process here is that, you know, if we're going to be continuing this work, and you know, something that we really talked about today as well is this idea of communication and dissemination. And you guys know that's my work package for GoGreen, so this is something that I'm thinking about all the time. But how do we build awareness about what we're doing? And if we have a coordinated effort, then that makes life so much easier. You know, it's about inefficiencies as well. And that might go into some of the conversations about technology and science and innovation and research. How do we get that into practice? So, and if there's more cooperation amongst the projects, then maybe it's easier to disseminate that information and put it into practice. I don't know if anyone has any thoughts on that. Otherwise, I'm going to start calling. Yes, Cecil, please. Oh. That's fine. We've got lots of mics.
Yeah, so what we're doing at the moment at the Royal Danish Academy is contacting stakeholders in Denmark, trying to understand how conservatives can be a bit more part of the decision-making, the strategic decisions about cultural heritage, because that's where I think we should be headed. Who's making those decisions? And in our country, it's the reality of the museums. who's in charge in the museums. That's the art historians, the historians, and so on. And where are they in this discussion? And I think that's actually crucial, because some of the people we talk to do not realize that you can do research in conservation. Yep. They just don't get that concept. So we had to hire an art historian to help us do that outreach, just to be able to be sort of a respected equal in that conversation. Yeah. And so I think making sure that the right people are in these discussions, on that level at least, helps.
Yeah, no, and that's such an important point as well. Is like, this is not just about conservators. And we talked about this earlier today, is that this affects so many different stakeholders. I mean, if you know anything about my non-GoGreen work, I do a lot with climate control and HVAC systems. And, so often architects are not part of the conversation. And as a conservator, why would I think an architect needed to be talking with me about preservation? But this is exactly your point. There's a missing link between conservation and additional fields. So I think that's also something to kind of think about when we're thinking about the idea of continuation and the idea of collaboration, is that it's not just about linking us with ourselves, but it's about linking us with other fields and building the awareness outside of the sector. So that kind of brings me to the next topic I'd love to unpack. And I think, this is just food for thought. I don't think we are going to solve all of the problems today, but at least we're going to come away with some inspiration for what we might like to see in the future. But let's shift gears a little bit toward, and to talk a little bit more about the research, technology, and science side of this, because obviously, at the core of what the Green Cluster does is research and scientific developments and technological developments, which, by the way, are way over my head. Very, very impressive work to all of our team members. But it's really exciting to see so much innovation. But then, as a practical conservator, what do I do with that? So maybe Andrea, if you don't mind, I would love to start with you to talk a little bit about your work in the field of research, innovation, science, technology, and how that gets put into practice. What does that look like in the day-to-day world? And how do we translate that from the research lab into daily work?
Okay, thanks, and thanks for the invitation, by the way. And though I've been working in the cultural heritage, I would say I'm not a professional in the cultural heritage, so a little bit an outsider today, and has been very nice to follow the incredible activities that have been presented today. But I think cross-fertilization with many other sectors is so important now. If I can see a gap from the discussion this morning, is exactly about technology foresight. I mean, so there are few technologies that have been picked up and have been experimented, but there's so many out there that may be used in the future. So, and taking advantage of a future partnership, I think that a technology foresight exercise that will look at 5 years, maybe 10 years, to understand what could be the other technologies that could help in a way or the other the cultural heritage, and how we can face existing, current and future needs as the many that I've seen in terms of preventive conservation, for example. And I mean, the future of technology will be, of course, on AI, will be on robotics and humanoids, will be on neurotechnologies, just to pick up some very future technologies. Will neurotechnology interact with cultural heritage? Likely, yes, So maybe it's nice, given we now have a long-term commitment to start, thinking long-term. And with this kind of thought, it would be even much easier to interact with other scientists. It's easier to think in the future, but think in the short term when you start a discussion. So
I love that, though, but it's also exactly what we were just saying about connecting all of the stakeholders. And this also alludes to what Piero was talking about earlier about connecting with industry. And it's a two-way street. All of the innovations that we're creating within the Green Cluster are obviously very useful for conservation, but have applications outside of cultural heritage, but also vice versa. I mean, if you look at paraloid B72, which is one of the most commonly used adhesives in the field, it was not originally from cultural heritage. It was not designed for that. I think it was designed for aeronautics, space stuff. I mean, also MOXIE. This was inspiration from space agencies. So there's so much to be learned from each other, not just within our field, but also outside. So thank you for that perspective. I think once again we're seeing how vast the impact is, but also how vast the opportunities are. So I'd love to pass over to Vania as our scientist to tell us a little bit more about her perspective on this and also about E-RIHS.
Thank you very much indeed. Just some clarifications about E-RIHS, because E-RIHS is not a project, actually, is an intergovernmental organization which has been funded with a decision of the European Commission back in March 2025, and there are part of our intergovernmental organization 11 countries. They are, I would like to mention them because they are part of the E-RIHS community, and they commit a lot to our activities in terms of funding, but especially in terms of scientific competencies coming from the national levels of our heritage science interdisciplinary community. Anyway, they are Cyprus, Malta, Spain, France, Slovenia, Romania, Poland, the Netherlands, the United Kingdom, and Italy as host countries. And we have also ICROM as a permanent observer. And why we were established? We were established in order to overcome this fragmentation in heritage science. And actually, what we do, we offer services, we offer access to laboratories, competencies spread out in these 11 countries. And which is our role in this context? What next? I really liked the comment at the beginning of Angela, because Angela, you said we need to start from now, from the priorities we have right now, because what we are building next, they are built on what we are doing right now and about the priorities. And also I liked very much the comment at the beginning that Alexandre made about this cooperation among the different initiatives, because we are not project, we are long-term initiatives, at least, and we will continue working thanks to the support of the member states and the European Commission. But which is our role? This morning I've heard a lot about the outcomes of your projects. Actually, you achieved very, very, very interesting results, outcome, concrete new technologies, new applications. So in a concrete term, E-RIHS in this very moment is working on its scientific strategy that will last 5 years, from 2026 to 2030. We have included as part of one of our priority resilient heritage, which means all the different activity, all the different techniques, capacities that can be helpful in order to support, for instance, preventive conservation, risk assessment, adaptation, and so on and so far. So maybe a very concrete first step could be looking at what you achieved in this project, talk with your national coordinator, because E-RIHS is a distributed research infrastructure. We have a headquarters in Florence with a very nice plate saying with the logo of the European Commission. Is plastic, but the value of that plate is invaluable, because it's the result of years of working. So we are a distributed research infrastructure. So I encourage you to go to your national node coordinators. We have a national node coordinators for each country participating in our project, and to see if we can onboard your services, the services you have developed as part of your projects, as part of the services we are going to offer to our community. And I think this is a very concrete and very initial step to look into the sustainability of the different kind of services. And I also think that it is also under our mission, as ERIC established by the European Commission to give to the scientific community a place, a framework in which they can offer the services, and these services can be used by the communities working in the field. I have Piero next to me, so in front of me, but it comes to my mind one aspect, because may I continue a little bit, because it's so we offer access to 4 access platforms, which are ArcLab, which means collections, reference materials, restoration reports. This is ArcLab. Then we have FixLab, accelerators, synchrotrons, very fixed laboratory. We have MOLAB, mobile laboratory, which means all the portable instruments that we bring to museums, archaeological sites, library in order to study the material of cultural heritage. And now we are working on DigiLab, which is the last platform. We are already offering some tools, some digital tools. For instance, this morning, as part of, I think it was.
I think Vania, I'm getting some questions in. So.
For instance, AIRI, yes, which is the platform that was shown this morning. We are working together with the person who developed, Lukasz Bratasz, from the Academy of Polish Academy of Science, in order to onboard AIRI as part of the E-RIHS offer in as a DigiLab tool. But also I would like to explore how to offer, for instance, the use of materials as part of the new materials as part of the European research infrastructure for heritage science, because this is also a way to build capacity building with the practitioners and operators working in the field. Yeah. Thank you for your patience. I was a little bit longer.
Thank you. No, I appreciate it. I also really appreciate the concrete proposal. I think it's really exciting to hear how the project or the projects that we've been exploring today could continue to work through this platform. So thank you so much for sharing that. And I would like to plant that seed. I do have some interesting questions coming in online that I'd like to get to, but I would like to plant this seed. Just from every stakeholder's perspective, how do you tangibly see the Green Cluster projects supporting your work? So as a conservator, how do you see the outputs that you've seen today helping to support you? As policymakers, how do you see the Green Cluster being able to support you? As leaders of international projects and programs and civil society networks, how does this relate? So I'm going to plant that seed, but I'm going to shift gears for just a second, because this is something I think is really, really important to address. There's some discussion online about this idea that while we're here in our safe bubble and our little community space where we all care so passionately about this, and it's obvious that this is something that is supported by the European Union, it's supported by ourselves, we understand the importance and relevance of it, but there are some concerns that outside of our bubble, it's not as relevant. There's maybe a little bit of a feeling that cultural heritage is not as important for society, and that there are issues with resource availability for being able to reach out to and advocate with other fields, and that there is limited cooperation across disciplines and silos due to little funding. So what are our thoughts on that? Do we agree? Do we think that there are some ways that we might be able to support more advocacy for the cultural heritage sector with the public and with industry and with larger scale implementation of the importance of what we're all so passionate about? I don't know if anyone has. Yeah, please go ahead, Angela. Whoop, man down.
Flood.
No electronics there. We're good. I have to hear your thoughts.
It's a super complicated question.
It is. It's not easy.
No, I mean, actually, I started as an archaeologist, and then actually I turned very quickly into cultural resources management and international cultural resources management, exactly for this reason, because resources were scarce, and for me the point was, how do we justify to society that what we are doing is important and that it is important to allocate resources to that? And it's been a while that I've been on this, and it's always a challenge, because cultural heritage is fundamentally important. It's at the core, I was saying earlier, of our treaties. But again, if I think of all the work that has been done on security, preparedness, and the like, it's one of the core societal functions.
Yes.
So when it comes to all the work that is being done for preparedness, we know that this is important. We see it in Ukraine. Mm-hmm. How much, and Professor Parzinger was mentioning before, how much the impact of heritage may have on people's resilience. Yeah. We see it also on Russia's side, the way they attack deliberately. And it's not only Russia, because others have been doing that in other crises all around. I mean, it's years that we see that. So heritage is important, but then there's always something that is somehow more important. Yeah. And the game is, we were discussing earlier about this. For me, the game has always been and is to try to understand what's the spirit of the time, to try to understand the global priorities. Earlier, I spoke about the priorities that are set forth in the compass, but I would trigger a further reflection. Let's think, and please think, about the priorities that are there for Europe. Yeah. Its competitiveness, its resilience, its security, its defense, and try to think, what is the entry door for cultural heritage to feed into these priorities, and then argue around these entry door to get access to resources that would not otherwise go straight into cultural heritage, because as a package, if I need to choose in between security and heritage, it's going to be difficult.
Right, but I think that's such a astute way to put this, is that it's aligning with current priorities and current trends. I think that this was touched upon a little bit by Thomas earlier, because there's opportunities to integrate culture into everything, whether that is defense, as we were talking about in the Ukraine, or whether that is into the year of culture, or whatever it is, something much more tangible. But I think that I totally agree with you. I think it's about understanding what the priorities are, but it's also, we tend to focus on what's urgent. And with so many fires going on right now, literally and figuratively, it seems to be that there's less urgency in protecting cultural heritage and more urgency in protecting human lives, which, we don't need to debate things here, but it's really, it is a really interesting kind of dynamic that we can explore. I have a couple of follow-up questions, but I know that Bessie had a question here, so go ahead, or follow-up.
I wanted to say that research into green materials didn't start in Europe. Mm-hmm. In fact, it's been going on for a long time in countries where they don't have the same safety regulations, like North Africa or in India. Mm-hmm. And it goes hand in hand with green chemistry and looking at natural byproducts for protection, corrosion inhibition. So it's not new to Europe. I mean, it's something that came from outside of Europe. And I also want to agree with our Italian colleagues that we need to link with industry. It was mentioned with the Green Art Project and the Shiseido. There are many companies in industry that are creating green products for removal of paints, et cetera, corrosion inhibitors, and we need to link with them to help finance research that is maybe more directed towards cultural heritage materials. I don't agree that we're working in a silo approach. I think conservation restoration research is not silo, in my opinion. I see a multidisciplinary field of people working together, whether it's architects, scientists, conservators, historians. We're working together. So, but we need to bring in industry. This is the key, in my opinion.
Well, thank you for that. And I think that that's something that's really important to highlight, is that we have a lot of different perspectives because we have different experiences. But it's so exciting to see that there is opportunity and that there is momentum and that there is a lot of collaboration happening. And I guess the question is, how can we invite more? So that's really exciting. Andrea, I'd love to hear your thoughts.
I can comment on this. Yes, but if we look at what is cultural heritage, in a way I can say there's no business case. Just let me say this way, it's a little drastic, but yeah, it is. I mean, this is provocative. In other terms, the business case is very complex. That's the other term of saying this. I mean, because the volumes are limited, and so making a business case in order for in terms of conservative treatments, I'm speaking about supplier conservative treatments and materials, it may not be so easy. Unless you link it to public value, unless you link it to something that could make a long-term business, So I'm not saying it's impossible, but nowadays it's difficult. If you take a big company, I mean, volumes are in terms of thousands of tons of materials, but it's completely uncomparable to what is the need of cultural heritage. So I'm just saying that you need to take into account this aspect and address it. For me, the way to address it is the so-called networked innovation, where you develop partnerships with companies, with research organizations, and you work with them on a long-term time frame, where companies can have, let's say, a secured market because they know the player, they know the clients, and maybe they can invest something on this. It's like if you take the example of a pharma company, it's the rare disease case. No one wants to invest, And we need to be really, really clear on this. For me, public support is something needed. Can be in the form of public procurement, can be in the form of incentives, whatever it is. And the business case should be developed around the money, but as well the public value. And of course, companies can understand the public value. And they can as well understand the opportunity in terms of research, because of course it's a nice place to experiment, but it's such a case-by-case approach. But I mean, to develop a product based on a conservation method can be, but it's difficult. So this, I think, we need to take into account. We can address it, but it's important to have it in mind.
I think that, there's opportunities for us to be a little bit more creative and think outside of the current frameworks of business cases as they are. And so I know we have a bunch of questions. We'll take one here, and then I've got one online that I'd like to bring up. Oh, sorry. I've got computers blocking me. Please, go ahead.
I just wanted to...
Can we get the microphone on down here? There we go. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I just wanted to respond a little bit to what Andrea was saying, and I agree with what you're saying very, very, very much. But there are so many different industrial sectors that we're dealing with, not just big industries. We're dealing with big industries, for example, in construction, and they have their own logic. Then we're dealing with SMEs, for example, in CCI, in cultural and creative industries, and they have their own logic again. And then we're dealing with micro companies, for example, in tourism businesses. Mm-hmm. They're typically single person, like in conservation. Yeah. It's a single person business. Mm-hmm. So what I think we have a problem with is this incredible diversity of industrial sectors that we need to work with. Mm-hmm. And I haven't even mentioned agriculture. In Europe, agriculture is more or less cultural heritage. We just don't call it that way. And there's a lot of industry there that we're not engaging with. Mm-hmm. And on the other hand, I'd just like to briefly disagree with what you said earlier. Mm-hmm. When you referred to our sector being very small. I think we're big. We're just not connected very well. We in this room, we're predominantly cultural heritage scientists or conservation scientists with a background in physics and chemistry, and that's one aspect of what we do.
Yeah.
But there's building conservators, there's archaeological conservators, there's lots and lots of different fields of expertise that are not connected very well. For example, digital and digital heritage more generally. We have not found a vessel or a container that would bind us all together. And we are really working. We are really looking ahead at what the partnership is going to do in this respect, and what E-RIHS is going to do in this respect, because I really see a future for the field and for us to be connected better.
Yeah. Oh, I love that perspective. And I think, we're going to hand that right behind you. Thank you so much for sharing that. And I completely agree. I think that there's so much. And actually, when we do start connecting, then we do realize how big we are. And not just big in terms of size, but big in terms of impact. And I think that that's what's really exciting. So thank you so much for sharing that. Let's see, we had a question back here. Please go ahead.
Works. Does it work?
Yes.
Okay, great. Just a quick comment, because I feel involved in the crossing industries and research, because I'm an architect and PhD working for a company, Italian company, and I'm a green conservation business development manager. I experienced doing my research path important difference between industries and companies. In Italy, we are living a particular moment where we have a lot of novel companies and economic operators in general that are producing greener technologies and materials for conservation purposes. And I detect two different approaches. Micro companies are more focused on innovation and greener, starting from developing solutions with low impacts, while on the other side, in the construction industry, we have big companies developing greener material with different purpose, using carbon credits to compensate their emissions. So it's a totally different thing. So I want to remark that because our main challenge in practice, conservation practice, is that the construction industry is developing greener materials, but not actually real greener if we consider that their actions are to compensate their pollution using credits. So, but I think it's time to do that, because in Italy we have this specific time where we have a lot of people investing in this. And we was also able this year to publish 100 Italian greener conservation stories soon, so hopefully in the next months. So it's time we have this thing. I think it's really important, and everyone marked before, to make this connection. Thank you
so much for that. No, and I think that this could be an entire panel session discussion, and I actually hope that we do that someday. But I wanted to pick up on one of the other threads that Bessie mentioned, and this is about the kind of the social aspects and the social sustainability aspects. And we had a question online saying, green conservation initiatives, such as those promoted by the Green Cluster, often focuses on material and technological solutions. How do these approaches address social inequality in practice? For example, how are they made accessible to countries, regions, or cultural institutions with limited resources? As Bessie mentioned, some of them came from those countries in the first place. I believe the next step is to explicitly implement sustainability strategies that combine environmental responsibility with social justice and inclusion. I'd love to open up to really anyone who would like to comment on that or has thoughts. Eleonore? Thank you. Yeah, go ahead, Eleonore. Let's do Eleonore and then Hermann. Yes.
I do think there is a link. We as in conservation, we focus on the conservation of the physical objects or the material, the buildings, but if we do it well, that is, if we do it with the stakeholders, immediately you have a whole realm that opens, which has to do with practice, know-how, traditional knowledge, ancestral ways of life. Who was talking about agriculture? Yeah. And when we take conservation from this approach, branching out into people and how it impacts them, how they want conservation to be done on their own heritage. There's an empowerment, a social empowerment, and this in turn links to the protection of ecosystems. Quite literally. I have in the museum in which I work, which is a museum with non-European holdings, we have several projects that branch out directly. There's this causality effect. For instance, a project on the northwest coast of Canada basketry, which is done traditionally with cedar bark. And so we work with practitioners. The way in which we work with practitioners of basketry, it impacts the work we do in conservation, but it also branches out into how do we protect the ecosystems that enable these baskets to be still made today and maybe tomorrow. And we have the same thing with a project in the Marquesian Islands and another project in Tasmania with kelp containers. So I think if we do it well, and if we constantly have in mind that heritage is not for ourselves, it is for a socially, globally connected set of peoples, then intrinsically it becomes more sustainable, and it is a way through conservation to transfer these knowledges in both sides. So Bessie was mentioning these traditional techniques that enter the conservation field, and innovative techniques such as atomic oxygen, which is completely non-traditional, may also diffuse in the conservation of heritage, which is highly traditional. It's a two-way street, but it works. In practice, it works.
I love that. That's so beautifully said. Hermann, actually, first, please.
Very quickly, I would like to comment on the smaller cultural institution, because E-RIHS is a European organization, but we also do care about the smaller cultural institution. Indeed, we have just launched the so-called matchmaking services, which means that we are trying to offer our services to the practitioners, both individual practitioners and also public servant, let's say, so practitioners working in the public institutions, because this morning this was this discussion, no? And this, let's say, opposition between private and public. Actually, we are offering our service to both sides. And these matchmaking services is they are offered at the national level by facilities at the national level, so to practitioners at the national level, and they are devoted to routine analysis, for instance, or also to exploratory projects. And they are focused on the capacity building of smaller cultural institutions that maybe they don't have the capacity to reach the competitiveness of the European level. Mm-hmm. I just have a small comment to what Mattia said about a unique container. So I like this idea of a cross-sectoral approach, but this is why, in my opinion, we don't need a unique container, but we need to cooperate in a more efficient way, and to have this structured dialogue among all the different initiatives, because we have several specificities, and we need also experts working with the industry in order to be able to work with the private companies, in my opinion.
Yeah. Thank you so much for that. Hermann, please.
Well, first of all, I wanted to underline what you said. I mean, conservation is only indirectly having a social impact, because you have to construct the context. Mm-hmm. Conservation makes surviving the object, let's say it in that way. But then you have to tell the story of the object, so it has a social impact on society. Yep. So this is very important, to give the object a voice. I mean, this is important. The first step is, of course, conservation. But something different. I mean, I think one of the basic problems is fragmentation. Mm-hmm. And the second is we are always convincing the already convinced ones. And this, I mean, I mean, what Matthias said about agriculture, of course, is heritage, but who from this huge agricultural field is aware of that? Did we try to explain them? And what Angela also said, we have to explain the different sectors why heritage is important. Yeah. Security is, it's closely related. Yeah. I mean, I think not one European country would be prepared in case of war, for example. International destruction, we wouldn't. We have rescue security plans from the Second World War, and even at that time, that didn't work very well. So, I mean, and of course, it's also not so easy to have it prepared, but I think this is also interconnected. I still remember when in the 20 years ago, when the West sent troops to Afghanistan, and also the German army went there, we had training programs. When I was at that time at the German Archaeological Institute, we had training programs for the German soldiers who went there, explaining them the cultures, why it is important, they have to take care for this and that, and so on. And other countries did it also, and then it dawned away. Yeah. It wasn't repeated later in Iraq, and so we have not been in Iraq happily, but no, you see, there's a lot, and in that moment they understood that heritage and the people working with heritage, archaeologists, art historians, conservators, are important, that they give their information to the army, that they know what they are doing, what they are caring for when they are going there. Yeah. So there are many sectors, and I think it's not easy, I know, and nobody has the time to do it, but we have in a way to find strategies to make strong why heritage is important for all these different sectors, or at least for some of them.
Yeah, no, I completely agree.
That's the solution, but it's a problem.
Well, we already stipulated we don't have to come up with all the solutions today, but I'm very excited that there's so much that we can unpack together. And it sounds like we've got this connection between this, or kind of this common thread of communication. And it's not just about communication with each other, but it's also about communication outside of the sector with the general public. Alexandre, please.
Yes, just to add, it's not the solution, but it can be part of the solution in the partnership. I saw that there are a lot of expectations, so there is a lot of pressure. But we will try also to foster the living lab approach, which is more ground on local level, and try to connect in the ecosystem, local ecosystem, the different actors that can benefit from research on cultural heritage, whether they are actors from the political world, from the economic world, from the touristic side, from the cultural, or just simple citizens. So this is something that we want to foster, and also to encourage in the funding opportunities that we will launch. And we hope that at least it will be part of a solution for this.
That's amazing. Well, we certainly hope to be able to be a part of it. So amazing. Unfortunately, we are out of time. I wish we had another 3 hours because there's so much more I would love to unpack. But I think it's just so powerful what Eleonore said about heritage is not for ourselves. It's really for everyone. And I think that we all really understand that inherently. But it's part of our jobs, not just to preserve it and protect it, but to advocate for it. So I would love to do a final quick round just to hear from everyone one last time. So we are running a little bit late. Apologies for that, but there's just too many interesting conversations. And I'd like to circle back to my question. How can the Green Cluster work helps support you? So this may be in your research, in your programming, in thinking about policy making, in your day-to-day practice as a conservator, in your educational position. But Vania, you kind of started this off with kind of addressing some really concrete ways that your initiative and the Green Cluster can coincide. So maybe I'll hand the word to you if you'd like to build on that, and then we're just going to go down the line. So if we hand off to Eleonore next.
Does it work?
We're turning it on, I think. Thank you, gentlemen.
Okay. So as I said at the beginning, I would like to explore how to onboard the outcomes of the different research projects as part of the services that E-RIHS is annually offering to the community of practices of heritage.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. I think I can speak for all of us when I say that we want to talk further. Thank you. Eleonore.
Circling back to ECCO being a confederation of professional associations, I think there are very concrete ways in which all three projects from the Green Cluster impacted conservators, and it's through education, training, and dissemination. The simple fact that there are 2-3 days public trainings, that there are demonstrations, that there are hands-on workshops, that there are publications, that some of the projects are in link with academic trainings, so that it can impact students, professionals that are becoming, that are in the process of becoming, students that are in the process of becoming professionals. That's major, yeah. And that is something that I discovered through previous European funded research programs in conservation, and it's a small miracle, really, when you offer a 2-3 days training and you have 250 people flocking in for a day of presentations and a day of hands-on workshop, you know it works.
That's amazing and also very inspiring. I think we're going to be talking a lot over the next few months as the program wraps up and we're ready to start more implementation on the educational level. So thank you so much. Hermann.
Well, I can be very short. If I'm wearing the hat of Europa Nostra, I can say we should think about how we can better connect.
Yay! I love that. And that's an invitation to all of us. So I hope that you guys have all made friends today and you've been exchanging cards and you're planning on following up, because we are seeing that the communication aspect is going to be key moving forward. Cecil.
Well, obviously, we have many of the same needs as Eleonore just explained. We have the need for teaching materials, which are scarce in conservation. We need you to keep innovating and being in the forefront, because we shouldn't be afraid of doing really explorative work also. It shouldn't all be something that we use straight away, right? There's room for dreams, so I would encourage that. And then, of course, we will try to implement whatever we find useful, or we will have our students explore the materials that you develop. So thank you for incredible work that has been done. The green definitions, I'd like to stress also that I think it has been important and something we want to discuss with our students, of course, and with the field.
Grateful for that. Thank you. Alexandre.
Yes, so I think there are many ways in which we can collaborate. The first one is, of course, that we have a strategic research and innovation agenda, which is shared by the 30 countries funding the partnership, and also the Europe. So we have a priority in this agenda, which is on innovative and green solutions. So this is completely, I think, in the field. So we will update this agenda regularly to keep in line with the evolution of the research landscape. So any contribution from other networks, experts, professionals are, of course, gold for all of us. So this is the first way we can involve you. Then also, I want to invite the Green Cluster. So I don't know what will happen with the Green Cluster after the end of a different project, but we are building now a knowledge hub, which will aggregate progressively all the projects funded by the partnership. So we have funding to organize workshops, exchanges, and different type of networking activities. So I want to invite the Green Cluster to continue within this framework to advise the partnership for its future activity, so we can see how to do this concretely.
Amazing.
And the third one is evidence, but of course you can apply to the different calls because there will be a lot of opportunities, and please don't lose these.
Thank you so much. Fantastic.
Thanks. So how it will contribute, the Green Cluster will contribute to our work. I think I said it at the beginning. I mean, action feeds policy, that feeds action, and that's the way we walk forward. So from my side, all useful food for thought, reflection, for notes, and then hope to stay tuned on the continuation of the projects that are still running until next year.
Beautiful.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Last but certainly not
Okay. Every time I see advanced technologies like the ones I've seen this morning, low plasma flow of atomic oxygen or a tissue impregnated of an active substance or an hydrogel on a masterpiece, I'm always impressed, really impressed and amazed. And I think that everyone dealing with technologies seeing this will be impressed and will be interested in working in cultural heritage.
Yeah. I think we can all pat ourselves on the back with the incredibly impressive amount of work that we've done. So thank you for highlighting that. But what's so exciting is that, as I said, this is just the beginning. And I love that there are so many concrete ways that we can all work together. And I think one of the common themes that we've seen throughout this day, really, and especially highlighted in this panel discussion, is that there are so many opportunities. There are so many opportunities for us to collaborate. There are so many opportunities for us to continue to build on the work that we're doing. And what we've seen today is that this is working. What we're doing is really changing the sector. But this is an invitation for us to do more. And I know that we're already tired and we've been working a lot, but it's really exciting because days like this is when we actually see the impact that we can have and that we can actually start to build on these things. So my invitation to all of you and to all of you is that let's continue. So thank you so much, everyone. And I would like to invite you to join me in thanking our fabulous panelists.